The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 44. Fiend Fire and Photographs. Linda held the golden badger cup carefully as the three women stood in a small circle with Remus in the back garden of the little Lupin cottage. "Right," said Tonks firmly. "Fiend fire is notoriously difficult to control, so we're going to need to attack this together." She looked pointedly at Narcissa and at Remus, who had joined the three women in the garden soon after they'd arrived. "What can I do?" Linda asked. "Stay back," said Narcissa, Tonks, and Remus. "Just be ready to chuck that thing into the fire when we say so," Tonks reminded her. Narcissa set to work creating a strong shield charm, whilst Remus focused on maintaining a steady stasis charm. Once they'd indicated that they were ready, Tonks cast the fiend fire spell. Instantly, tongues of fire began licking up the walls of Narcissa's shield charm, and the older witch pushed back with everything she had. "Now, Linda!" Tonks yelled, already trying to douse the fiend fire flames as they threatened to escape. But Linda was suddenly frozen to the spot, racked by self-doubt. The cup, made evil by the introduction of the Horcrux, seemed to now sense its impending doom. As soon as the flames were conjured, the unassuming golden goblet had her doubting everything she thought she knew about her friends, her loved ones, and their loyalties to her. Were Narcissa and Richard having an affair? They could be, she thought. Would Richard have ever told her the truth about his role in military intelligence if she hadn't confronted him? Did he have other secrets that he hadn't told her? Did Hermione truly love them as much as she would have if they had been her biological parents? Would she ever measure up to Heathcliff and Octavia's standards? "Linda, you have to do it now! Throw the cup into the flames!" Tonks screamed. By this time all four of them were sweating from the barely contained diabolical fire. Remus's stasis charm was holding, but he was growing as weary as Narcissa. With an effort, Linda shut down the voices in her head firmly. She girded her resolve and aimed carefully, lobbing the golden cup directly into the center mass of the flames. There was a sound like screaming, like anguish. And then suddenly 2 more spells united with the 3 that were combating the fire. Andromeda's shield charm joined and strengthened her sisters, and Kingsley began vanishing as much of the fire as he could, alongside Tonks. With the added backup, Remus was able to help with the vanishing, and within a minute the fiend fire had shrunk to a tiny speck, which then blinked out of existence. The 6 of them stood, looking dazedly at each other. "Thanks for coming when you did," Tonks said weakly. "Nymphadora, Valpusilla, Tonks, Lupin, what the hell were you thinking, conjuring fiend fire?" Andromeda began, shaking like a leaf. "Is it enough to say that it's a very long story?" asked Tonks, stumbling to a chair on the lanai and dropping into it. "Don't get me wrong, Sissy and I probably got up to far worse in our day," Andromeda said, turning with a timid but conspiring smile to her sister. "Sissy, not that I'm not happy to see you here, but can someone explain exactly what's going on here?" Bellatrix turned away from the flu call, quaking in fear. Her vault at Gringotts, the most sacred, most secure of places, the last bastion and testament of her blood purity and standing within the wizarding community, had been violated. The thieves had impersonated Bellatrix, her husband Rodolphus, and her sister Narcissa. They had gotten away, according to her useless husband Rodolphus, with only a worthless, tarnished cup, barely worth mentioning. All of the valuable items had gone untouched. "A cup?" she asked, fearfully. "What kind of cup?" "The goblin just said it was gold, and had 2 handles. Had a little animal emblazoned on the front. Sounds like some useless flotsam that Rab probably picked up on holiday in France," Rodolphus said distractedly, clearly in a hurry to get back to whatever floozy he'd managed to coerce into entering his bed recently. Bellatrix gathered her voice. "I'm going to need you to come here to Malfoy Manor and report this to the Dark Lord." "Why? What's he got to do with this sodding cup?" Rodolphus asked distrustfully. The irate witch leaned forward, so that her nose nearly touched her husband's, hovering in the fire. As she spoke, her spittle flew onto the grate below and sizzled. "Just trust me. He needs to know, and you're just the messenger to tell him," Bellatrix said, with a sinister grin. She had no idea what the cup was for. Long before there had been drinking straws and moronic cousins and inane elixirs, there had been this stupid cup, another ridiculous obsession for the Dark Lord. He'd asked her to hide it, to keep it safe. Apparently she had failed. What did it matter, really? There were thousands of cups out there, millions even. But like his precious straw now, her lord had been protective of the cup, so she'd hidden it for him. But Bellatrix was no fool. She knew the Dark Lord's ire was likely to lash out at whomever told him about this cup, and she didn't want to be in the room when it happened. The 3 women that had jokingly called themselves the Charlie's Angels gave enough of the story as to the purpose of their trip to Gringotts to satisfy the curiosities of Lupin, Kingsley, and Andromeda. "I should be getting back to the manor. If there's any fallout from this, it'll likely happen soon," Narcissa said regretfully. "Andromeda, I don't have time to say everything I want to now, but I do want to tell you that I'm sorry for everything. I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but can we meet again soon?" Andromeda hugged her sister. "Of course, and believe it or not, I do understand. You were in a tough position, and I didn't reach out to you either. I didn't want to make it more difficult for you, and I regret that." The sisters embraced once more, and Narcissa disapparated back to Malfoy Manor. When she got there, it was clear immediately that all hell had broken loose. "Now what?" asked Linda. "Are there more of these, whatever this thing was? Will we have to do this again?" The 2 women were alone with Kingsley and Lupin. Andromeda had gone back into the house to check on baby Teddy. "I don't know," Tonks answered honestly. "I suppose it all depends upon whether or not the goblins alert you-know-who." But the answer came almost instantly, in the form of a message from Harry Potter. "He knows. Last one is in Hogwarts. Ron and I are going to try to get in and destroy it." Tonks looked up, turning her phone to show the others. "It's happening," said Kingsley sagely. "The Dark Lord will not allow Potter to leave the school. There's going to be a battle, and it's likely going to happen tonight. Message Narcissa, and ask her how things are there." Linda did so. Narcissa's answer came back. 999. Tonks looked up swiftly at Linda. The Muggle emergency number? Did you teach her that, in case things went pear-shaped?" Linda nodded. "I realized wizards don't use emergency services, but it seemed prudent to have some kind of code in place." "Right," said Lupin. "We need to contact the Order. Those that don't already know. Patronuses?"
Kingsley nodded. "Everyone will need to apparate directly into Aberforth's pub. That's where I'm told the passage to the school is. Please inform Potter first, before he hurries off half-cocked and alerts some snatchers."
Tonks nodded and called Harry to tell him where to go.
"And when you get into Hogwarts, please let Hermione and Draco know our status. She just texted me to say that classes were cancelled, and the group is meeting in the room of requirement."
Tonks hung up the mobile and turned to Linda.
"Ready to go?"
"Go? Where?"
"To Hogwarts, of course."
Linda took a deep breath. "Right, then, I'm ready. Oh, wait, my medical bag. Can we stop by my house?" she asked the younger witch anxiously. Tonks nodded. They left Kingsley to send patronuses to various members of the Order of the Phoenix, and hurried inside to bid Andromeda and baby Teddy goodbye. Watching the small family, Linda had to look down and wipe away her tears. Seeing the young mother kissing her child goodbye was heartbreaking, knowing where they were about to go. It was difficult to imagine having to say goodbye to such a precious baby. Linda herself had had to bid goodbye to not only the dream of carrying a child, but also to her own young daughter, each year at platform 9 3/4. There were few things in life more difficult, she knew, than saying goodbye to a child. But Tonks drew in a deep breath, hugged and kissed her husband fiercely, then took Linda's arm. She turned on the spot, with Linda's arm in hers. Destination, Hampstead. When they arrived at the front gate, Linda saw a flash of platinum blonde hair through the window. "Get behind the neighbour's hedge," she whispered frantically to Tonks. "I think Lucius is here."
"Don't go in!"
the young witch hissed quickly, holding tight to Linda's arm.
"It's all right. He thinks I'm on their side, according to Richard. I can do this. We've got to hurry. If he's already here, that means they're assembling, and they'll be at the school soon as well." "Holy Helga, this is such a shit idea!" Tonks moaned to herself, seeing as Linda had already stepped inside the gate and was rushing to the front door. Linda was greeted almost immediately by Lucius, who did not seem surprised to see her. "Ah, Lady Linda, I'm certain you are preparing for the fight as well,"
Lucius said with a small bow in her direction.
"Indeed I am, Lucius. I trust everything is ready," she said in a confident manner. I believe so. The giants have agreed to allow us to apparate them into Hogsmeade, though they insist upon bringing their instruments. There is no actual Yeti, of course, but I'm hoping in the melee of the battle the Dark Lord will not notice." "I should think not," Linda said, making a mental note to ask Richard what the hell all of this was about, giants and Yetis, once everything was finished. If everything was finished, and they were both still around to tell the tale. "Well, I'd only stopped by for my supplies," Linda said briskly, crossing the room and finding her medical bag in the coat closet. Lucius frowned. "You aren't coming with us?" No. I have my own contacts, my own way in. I typically work on a smaller scale. In the shadows, you know." Lucius was reminded of Richard's words all those years ago. "Linda is the real smooth operator when it comes to extractions. She's much smaller than me. She can get into tighter spaces easier. She can do an extraction before anyone even realizes it's happening to them. She's very gentle about it. I can never finesse it so well. Linda's a real professional, very skilled." He shivered a bit from the memory. "Yes, indeed. Well, it only makes sense." Linda withdrew her mobile phone and tapped in a quick message. "Right, I should go. Perhaps I'll see you, but probably not." Linda gave one last wink to Lucius and hurried back to the door as the wizard returned to the living room. At that moment, Richard was coming up the stairs from the cellar, an inconspicuous backpack slung over his shoulder, pocketing his mobile phone from which he'd been reading. Linda rushed to him, throwing her arms around him quickly and pushing him into the coat closet. He drew the door closed swiftly behind them and pulled the short chain to turn on the overhead light. "My God, I was afraid I wouldn't see you before I had to leave. Here, this is what you need," she whispered, reaching into her bag and withdrawing a small packet. She thrusted it into his hand, and he took it gratefully and pocketed it. "It's just enough to mess things up a bit. Hopefully it will work, and she knows what to do," Linda said cheerfully. "I'm sure they'll be useful, Lindy Hop. Hermione should be there when you go in. They're gathering. Keep her safe, please. Both of you, stay safe. Keep to the inner part of the building, and stay with someone capable. McGonagall, Dumbledore, Tonks," Richard said in a low voice, taking in a ragged breath. "I should be telling you that, Richard," Linda said, a tear escaping her eye, which she wiped quickly. "Well, unfortunately, I'm stuck with Lucius," Richard said with a wry grin, and they both laughed in spite of the dire situation. He kissed her deeply, then, drawing her into his arms and rubbing small circles on her back. "Well, try and keep him safe, then. I'd feel terrible for Narcissa and Draco if anything happened to him. You too," she smiled up at him. "After all, he's been your doubles tennis partner for years." "Yes, one of these days we'll manage to win a match," he said ruefully. "Hopefully not tonight, though," she said. "Indeed," Richard agreed. They stepped out of the coat closet, and after one final kiss, Linda hurried out the door. She stepped quickly up the walk, turning left and jogging to the end of the street. She rounded the corner, spotting Tonks pacing the sidewalk. Linda rushed to her. At her quick nod, without a word, Tonks took her by the arm and disapparated them to the Hogshead Inn. Richard hurried into the living room and met Lucius, who was lost in thought, looking at the photos on the mantel. His eyes skimmed over photographs of Hermione's birthdays and holidays past, of Octavia and Heathcliff, whitewater rafting in Turkey, of Richard's mom and dad, his father wearing his service dress uniform, each of them holding young toddler Richard's hand at a military cemetery on a beach somewhere in France, of Linda and Richard on their honeymoon in Tenerife. Richard looked over the other man's shoulder at the photos. He felt like a part of himself was saying goodbye, just in case. He knew his odds of returning home were not great, but as he looked at the photos, he knew they reflected a life well lived. He had that, at least. That and his family. Lucius appeared lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. "In the wizarding world, we're taught that muggles are dirty, dangerous. They're not like us. But I must say, Richard, I've come to respect you greatly in the last few years we've known each other. Sometimes I feel as though you were forced into this fight, you know? It wasn't your fight. Not really. But you have chosen it, just as assuredly as it chose you."
Richard wasn't sure what to say. He had seldom heard Lucius speaking so lucidly. After a moment he replied,
"I suppose that's true. But regardless of how I came to be here, there is something important to me involved in this fight. My family is part of this, so I'm a part of this."
Lucius nodded somberly.
"Your cousin," he murmured. "No," Richard said emphatically.
He pointed to the photo of Hermione the day she turned 10, her wild dog-ear ponytails flying behind her as she and Linda sped by on a carnival ride. Their hands were in the air, matching smiles on their faces, both looking at the next drop that was to come. Richard had snapped at the photo, and it was one of his very favourites.
"No,"
he said again, picking up the framed photo and turning it to Lucius.
"This is the family I'm fighting for. You need to decide which family you're fighting for as well, Lucius."
The blonde wizard was silent, considering. Richard resettled his bag on his shoulder and returned the frame to the mantel.
"Ready?"
Lucius only nodded, and took out the little bag of flue powder from his robe pocket.
"Malfoy Manor,"
he said roughly. The two of them stepped together through the flames and into the chaos on the other side. Chapter 45. Breakthroughs and Binges. Death Eaters were hurrying around the drawing room of Malfoy Manor, packing supplies of potions and weapons at a panic-stricken pace. Elves were offering tea and sandwiches to the frenzy of distracted wizards. Bellatrix was in a corner, standing angrily over the badly injured Rodolphus, who appeared to be recovering from several cuts and welts, as well as a prolonged Cruciatus curse. Bella was haranguing him for his apparent role in the break-in at Gringotts. In the 20 minutes or so since he'd left, things had apparently gone even more to shit, Lucius thought. Narcissa rushed in from the adjoining parlour. Lucius went to her, crushing her in an embrace.
"Sissa, what do we know of Draco and Hermione?" he added, his eyes flitting to Richard.
"I've not been able to reach him by flue, darling. He wasn't in the Slytherin common room, but it might have been because classes were going on, you know," Narcissa said comfortingly, exchanging a quick glance with Richard, who nodded. She was being truthful. They had received no word via flue, and Draco had not been in the Slytherin common room with most of the other Slytherins, but both she and Richard had recently received word from Hermione. She had written to Richard and Tonks to say that the Carrows had called for classes to be cancelled that afternoon, and for students to remain in their common rooms. This was an unusual direction from the Carrows, and at a meaningful glance from Snape, Hermione and Draco could tell that something was happening. They'd sent a message to Dumbledore's army via enchanted coin to meet in the Room of Requirement instead.
"All right, so we're awaiting the Dark Lord's orders, then?"
Richard confirmed. Jugson appeared in the doorway of the drawing room, hurrying over to meet up with Richard. The younger wizard spoke as he approached.
"I just spoke with Pettigrew in the foyer. Apparently the Dark Lord has misplaced his replacement wand."
Jugson clamped his lips together to avoid them curling into a smile. Inspired by the Dark Lord's love of the McDonald's straw, Jugson had been trying to work out a licensing and cross-promotional deal with the chain for the last month. He and Sirius were working to create a Fixer Elixir branded magic straw that changed colours when exposed to cold liquids. They'd be available only at Mackey's for a limited time, and he thought they were getting close to inking the deal. He only hoped he'd live to see it done.
"Well, we can't go anywhere without it,"
Richard agreed with barely suppressed mirth.
"I myself brought mine."
He patted his pocket, carefully. Jugson looked around, taking in the frenetic pace of the wizards and witches around them, everyone frantically running around gathering supplies, practicing spells, fumbling with their things. Perhaps bringing samples of Fixer Elixir's new variety, Unhinged Binge, wasn't the best idea for today. Everyone seems slightly manic.
"No matter," trilled Narcissa. "I'm sure they'll be fine."
Yaxley threw up in a corner onto Roll's cloak. Roll turned angrily and hexed the other wizard, turning him into a gelatinous mush.
"Well, perhaps not Yaxley,"
Narcissa finished brightly. After an exhaustive search of the manor, in which a house elf finally managed to locate the straw under the table in one of the medium-sized dining rooms, the group was ready to apparate into Hogsmeade. The Dark Lord raised his hands for everyone's attention. With the greatest effort, the crowd stopped their frenetic movements, their pulses still beating a tattoo in their ears.
"Our hour of glory has come. You shall bombard the gates. Besiege the castle from all sides, if you can. Take no prisoners," Voldemort called to his followers in a high, cold tone.
Bellatrix spoke up.
"My lord, it is our privilege to fight for you. Will you do me the honour of accompanying me into battle, as Rudolphus is no longer able-bodied?"
She leered at him.
"No! Recent events have indicated that Nagini and I must remain safe, separate from the fight. But rest assured, I will fight tonight. I shall meet Harry Potter face to face, and end his miserable existence once and for all."
Voldemort turned in a circle, waving his replacement wand high over his head, a promise of victory to come.
"We shall not be defeated. We shall prevail. Tomorrow we shall rule the wizarding world completely."
Voldemort turned on the spot, with Nagini's magically conjured cage in hand, and disapparated. The witches and wizards in the room hopped up on Unhinged Binge, the new special blend of Fixer Elixir that was triple the usual caffeine and sugar, practically vibrated in hysterical excitement. There was a rush of people running pell-mell into each other, until they all remembered that they were meant to be apparating, not fluing, into Hogsmeade. There was a flurry of cracks as the majority of them disapparated, leaving only Richard, Lucius, Narcissa, Jugson, Yaxley, and Rodolphus. The former four eyed the latter two dubiously. "You think they'll be all right to stay here?" Jugson asked the others uncertainly. Narcissa answered him.
"Let me take care of this. Tiffy!"
In an instant the adorable little elf appeared, smiling up at her mistress.
"Yes, mistress?"
"Tiffy, we're going to be out for a while, but these two,"
she gestured to the still shaking Rodolphus and the jellied Yaxley,
"are feeling a bit ill. Would you mind terribly watching after the two of them?"
Tiffy looked curiously at Yaxley, but her gaze turned downright impish at the sight of Rodolphus.
"I can take care of them, mistress,"
she replied with a ghost of a grin, hurrying away. Narcissa looked after her uneasily. It was well known within the household that Tiffy, of all the elves, had a real problem with anything related to Bellatrix.
Right. Where shall we go, then? Richard asked, eyeballing Lucius, who had been looking more doubtful in the last hour than Richard had ever seen him before. Lucius had been experiencing a bit of an existential crisis for a little while now. Earlier in the Granger home, he had peeked out into the foyer in time to see the affectionate parting between Richard and Linda. Turning back into the living room, where he had spent many hours talking to Richard over a plate of Oreos and Muggle beer, it dawned on Lucius that he had learned a lot in this place, even if he had not realized it at the time. His eyes had caught on the unusual family photos that did not move. It was clear to Lucius that Richard truly loved his family, and his life here in this dreadfully simple little home. It was a bit hard to comprehend, but this primitive existence, with its singular dining room and lack of attentive house elves and talking portraits, comforted the Muggle man. Lucius was realizing more and more as he spent time with Richard that pleasures in life did not always need to come from power, or influence, or family bloodlines, or wealth. It was a hard realization for a wizard like Lucius, but as he thought more about it, he knew that this epiphany was a long time coming. It was a revelation he'd been approaching for years. And that was why, here and now, in Malfoy Manor, when Richard asked where they should go, Lucius didn't have a good answer. Because the correct answer was to Hogsmeade. The answer, according to the will of Lord Voldemort, was to enter the frenzy of battle and fight for their master. That was the answer he would have given, without question, only a few years before. But more and more, the answer had gradually changed and shifted. It had occurred without him even realizing it. And now Lucius was no longer certain what the correct answer was. Because if he followed what his mind told him, what his sense of obligation and service told him, he would do just that. He would apparate into Hogsmeade and storm the castle, searching it room by room. He would do everything he could to locate and capture Harry Potter, and kill everyone the young, scar-headed wizard held dear. But if he followed his heart, then he would fight for his son and his wife, and for the friends they held dear. It was clear to him that Draco loved the young Granger witch, not because she was the daughter of a powerful, dark wizard, or because she had been raised to spearhead Voldemort's vision for the future, or because she was trying to infiltrate Potter's organization and report back secrets to Voldemort. In all the time Lucius had known Hermione, she'd provided no secrets about Potter. She'd professed few ambitions towards darkness, other than that frightful jar business, to which Lucius had to give his begrudging respect, really. She had not killed Dumbledore. Yes, she'd thrown that loud fire thing at Bellatrix in the Department of Mysteries, but, truthfully, Lucius had fantasized about doing much worse to Bellatrix over the years. Hermione's words might seem menacing. She had called him a worm once, after all. But her actions, at least towards his family, had not been menacing, really. It seemed that Draco loved the girl for who she was. And whilst Linda was clearly dangerous, Lucius also knew that she had become a good friend to Narcissa. He knew the women spent time together often. The shopping bags from Muggle London, hidden in the back of their closets, was clear evidence of this. He would do what he could
to protect the boy and Narcissa, no matter where they stood in the fight, and the same would hold true for the people they cared about. Bloodlines, lineage, family status, what did that truly matter if your own family hated everything that stood for? Because it was clear now to Lucius that they did, in fact, hate many of the decisions he had made regarding both Richard and Voldemort. Narcissa and Draco had always told him he was being ridiculous about Richard. What if he had been? He looked hard at the man in front of him. The man was about to enter a magical battle with no wand. Was this truly what Richard wanted?
"Richard, may I speak to you privately?"
Lucius murmured. Richard nodded. The two men left Narcissa and Jugson and stepped into the next room. Lucius paced a bit before finally speaking.
"I'm not sure that I, in good conscience, can enter this fight today. I'm not certain that either of us should."
Richard eyed him carefully. "What brings you to that conclusion, Lucius?" Lucius sighed heavily.
"I know that you are the Dark Lord's cousin, and that you very well might kill me for expressing these thoughts. But I have come to realize that perhaps I have pledged my allegiance wrongly."
"In what way?" Richard asked.
"In that I do not believe that Narcissa or Draco wish to fight for the Dark Lord, and I do not know that I wish to fight for the Dark Lord, I mean,"
Lucius finished awkwardly. Richard cleared his throat. Geez. He crossed the room to Lucius, who looked fearfully at the Muggle man. Was he about to be killed for his insurrection? But Richard only stuck out a hand to shake. Slowly, tentatively, Lucius placed his hand in the other man's and shook it. "Okay, then," Richard said. "Well, if we aren't fighting for the Dark Lord, we should still be there to protect our families. We might still be needed."
"Okie dokie,"
said Lucius in relief. Richard looked sharply at the wizard. "Have you always used that phrase? I've never heard you say that before."
No. I overheard our elf, Eustace, saying it to another elf once, and I rather liked it."
Richard nodded solemnly. "Then, okie dokie." The two men joined Jugson and Narcissa, who had been in furtive conversation.
"Jugson, the fact that you are still here indicates to me that you are wavering in your steadfastness to the Dark Lord. Am I correct?"
Lucius asked quietly as they approached. From behind the blonde wizard, Richard nodded to the others to indicate that it was all right to speak more freely. "You are right. To be perfectly honest, I have become involved with someone on the other side of the battle, and I do not wish to fight in it. However, I plan to go and offer my protection to this person."
"Merlin help us all," Lucius thought.
"Very well.
Richard, Jugson, and I will go into Hogsmeade and remain close to the battle, but, Narcissa, I do not plan to fight, and I think it best if you stay here to remain safe."
Narcissa smoothed down her robes and drew herself up to her full height. "I also have friends on the other side of this battle, Lucius, and I plan to be there to support them, to fight for them, if necessary." Lucius inhaled sharply, then nodded. The world was turning, spinning off its axis, and he was no longer certain which way was up. But one thing was clear. The epicenter of it all was at Hogwarts, so they must go.
"The back room of the 3 broomsticks,"
Lucius proposed, and the others nodded. He placed one hand on Richard's arm and the other on Narcissa's. Richard did the same to Jugson, who in turn grasped arms with Narcissa. The 3 magical people twisted, and in a whirlwind of compression and space, the 4 of them disapparated. Chapter 46. Dumbledores and Diadems. Harry had realized almost instantly that Tonks and her group must have been successful in their endeavor to locate a Horcrux. It was made clear to him by the vision he'd had, directly from the mind of Voldemort. In the vision, Voldemort was punishing the goblin who had delivered the message about the robbery at Gringotts, the wizards who had been guarding the bank, and Rodolphus for allowing his vault to be infiltrated. It was clear that a cup was missing, and Voldemort's ire was truly terrifying to behold. When the punishment was over, Voldemort had run through his inner list of Horcruxes, wondering about the safety of each. He had rushed into a study or office of some sort, casting a summoning spell for a diary that was no longer there. Apparently, Voldemort had not realized that Lucius had gotten rid of it years before. Harry listened in to the Dark Wizard's thoughts as he considered locating Lucius for punishment, then decided that there would be time for that later, after the other Horcruxes were accounted for. Where to go first? Dumbledore could have learned of his family lineage from the orphanage. Perhaps he should start with the Gaunt Shack. The cave certainly was secure. He had erected many protections for it, and he was satisfied that the one at Hogwarts could never be found. Nagini was in Malfoy Manor with him, resting in their quarters, but to be careful he must keep her with him, protected at all times. He summoned the large snake, securing her in a magical cage of light. Then he spoke to his followers, many of whom seemed more than slightly manic. Finally, holding Nagini's cage tightly, he disapparated to Little Hangleton. Harry woke up on the floor of the kitchen in the Black House. He was surrounded by the concerned faces of Ron, Dumbledore, and Sirius, the tea that the 4 of them had been enjoying forgotten on the table. Harry looked about in momentary disorientation. Dumbledore spoke. "Harry, what did you see?" "He knows that we know about the items. The last one is at Hogwarts," Harry said in a rush of disbelief. "He's going to check on all of them. The one at the school, last, most likely. I didn't see what was at Hogwarts, but the one that Tonks found was the Cup of Hufflepuff, so the one at Hogwarts is likely related to Ravenclaw." Sirius looked confused by the details of the discussion, but did not interrupt. Harry stood up from the floor. "He just learned that the diary is gone. I think he's going to the Gaunt Shack next. Then the cave. The last one is somewhere inside Hogwarts. We need to go and find it before he can," he said, dusting off his hands on his trousers. "Professor Dumbledore, are you coming?" Albus Dumbledore looked hesitant. "Harry, almost everyone outside of a handful of the innermost order believe me to be dead. I'm afraid that if I go there today, I will be a distraction for our people. Besides, this is your fight now. As I told you nearly a year ago, you have the tools you need, your knowledge, the sword, and the ring. Harry, there's something you should know about the ring. There will come a time when you will need help, strength. When that time comes, hold the ring and turn it in hand 3 times. I've told you that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. With this ring, you do not even need to ask. help is waiting. That being said, while I will be with you in spirit, it is ultimately up to you to defeat him." Harry grasped the hands of his professor. "I won't let you down." "Harry," Professor Dumbledore admonished kindly, "you could never let me down." "Well, I'm going with you," said Sirius. "There's someone there I've grown to care about, and I'm going to do what I can to keep them safe. I feel they would do the same for me." After a few hurried preparations and some helpful suggestions of where to go from Tonks via Mobile, the three of them flew directly into the Hogshead Inn. Aberforth was wiping glasses with a dirty cloth behind the bar. "What are you three doing here?" "We're preparing to fight against you-know-who. Don't be surprised if more people come through here soon, Aberforth," Sirius said. Behind him, the two young Gryffindors looked at each other in surprise. Looking at the man named Aberforth, there could be no doubt whose pub they'd just entered. Then Sirius turned to Harry and Ron. "I'm going to stay here, in the village. Richard and Narcissa will be out here, and they might need help, and—" "Your person on the other side?" Harry asked knowingly. Sirius smiled. "Yes." "Go. Good luck. Be safe." Sirius hugged his godson. "You as well." With that, Sirius transformed into the huge black dog of his animagus form, and trotted out the front door of the pub, into the gathering darkness of dusk. Harry and Ron turned back to Aberforth, who had watched the entire exchange with an annoyed expression. "My brother was too cowardly to come," Aberforth sneered. Harry approached the older man who looked so much like his brother. "Aberforth, I've lived with Professor Dumbledore this past year, and we've talked about your family, you know, after Rita Skeeter's book was published. I read it, and he and I discussed it at length this year." "So you know how much of a coward he is, in his heart," Aberforth bit out, "sending a child to do a man's job." "He knows that this is my fight, and he didn't want to be a distraction tonight." "Funny, he didn't mind it so much years ago when it came to our sister," Aberforth said bitterly. "I've tried to let bygones be bygones over the years, but that Skeeter book dredged up a lot of bad memories for me. I suppose none of that bothers him, though. Ariana was just another child whose life didn't matter to him. She was just another stumbling block to his rise to greatness, after all." "It mattered very much," Harry said quietly. "The night that he supposedly died, he and I went to a cave. He drank a horrible potion that made him relive his worst memory there. He told me later that it was the memory of you and Ariana being tortured by Grindelwald." Aberforth diligently wiped the dirty glass with a dirty cloth, not looking up to meet Harry's eyes. "You should talk to him about it," Harry finished. Aberforth grunted, then gestured up the stairs that ran along the back wall of the pub. "Up there! The big room, on the left. Tell the painting that you need to get into the school." "Thank you," Harry said, and the two of them hurried up the stairs. After a few moments, Aberforth gave up on the dirty glass, and withdrew his wand from his pocket. Waving it in front of him, he conjured a brightly glowing goat Patronus. The boy was right. A conversation was needed between himself and his brother, but for now, a summons would have to suffice. He whispered his message to the goat, then watched as it cantered headlong through the nearest wall and out of sight. "So you got no idea where the lost diadem of Ravenclaw could be?" Ron asked the assembled band of Ravenclaws again. Just as before, they all shook their heads no. He tried again. "There's no secret hideaway in Ravenclaw Tower. Everyone's checked all the possible hiding places in the common room." "It can't hurt to look again," Harry said. "Luna, you said there's a depiction of the diadem on Rowena Ravenclaw's statue. Can you show it to me? Maybe we can check a few other places on the way. The trophy room, or the library."
"I can get you into Ravenclaw Tower. Let's bring Ginny with us. I know she missed you, Harry, and she can help us with the Carrows if we encounter them," Luna said, jumping up to take her ginger-haired friend by the hand. The three of them set off for Ravenclaw Tower under Harry's cloak, Harry carrying the sword of Gryffindor. "We can't just sit here doing nothing," Hermione said under her breath to Draco. "Godric knows we spent enough time in this room last year. I can't just sit around in here again. Is there anywhere else we can think to check?" Draco sat fidgeting for a moment. Then he suddenly grew still. "Hermione, you're right. We did spend a lot of time here last year. Do you recall it well?" She gave him an odd look and blushed. "Of course I do. It took us so many months to repair that cabinet, but what does that have to do with—" "No, witch. I'm not talking about the cabinet. I'm talking about all of the things in the room with us. You remember, there were piles of things that people had vanished or lost or forgotten about, or maybe things that people hid away from others." Hermione's eyes lit up. "Draco, my God, you're a genius. We've got to get everyone out of here. Transform the room back to the room of hidden things."
"Can you send a message to Potter? Tell him to meet us back here with the sword?" Draco asked eagerly. She took out her mobile and tapped out a message, but grew frustrated after a moment.
"It says it wasn't received by him. Now that I think of it, I had to do a modified bubblehead charm to make my mobile work here inside Hogwarts, and he didn't do that. His won't work."
"Patronus!"
"Too dangerous. He's trying to be stealthy. It wouldn't do for a little silver otter to run up to him with a message."
"Right. Shit. So even if we find it, we have to wait around here for him to get back with that blasted sword."
"No!" Hermione breathed. "I know what we need."
And with that, she rushed over to Ron, who was talking with Pansy and Neville. It took only a few minutes to clear the room of requirement. Dumbledore's army began to disperse around the castle in order to find strategic hiding and fighting places. Ron, Neville, and Pansy set off for the Chamber of Secrets. After witnessing Harry open the chamber several years ago, and the locket only a few months back, Ron felt confident that he could replicate the parcel-tongue needed to open the chamber. As Pansy and Neville knew the patrol schedule for the Enforcement Brigade, they were eager to help. Draco walked hand in hand with Hermione in front of the troll tapestry 3 times, concentrating hard on what they needed. The door to the room appeared, and they rushed to it. The inside was just as they remembered. Towering piles of broken and burned furniture, hopelessly outdated clothing, snapped quills and crumpled up parchment stood as far as the eye looked. Shattered broomsticks, broken trophies, bits and bobs were flung everywhere.
"I recall seeing a treasure chest of sorts. It was piled high with all manner of jewelry, it seemed. Perhaps we start there?"
Hermione suggested, although determining where that was proved to be difficult. After a few wrong turns, they located the chest. They dug through quickly, then slowly once more, but nothing sapphire, nothing that looked remotely like a diadem, was there.
"Should we split up?" she asked, a note of desperation creeping into her voice.
"No, this place is too big. We could lose each other easily in here. We stay together," Draco answered with as much confidence as he could muster. 30 minutes and 4 false alarms later, a glint of blue caught Hermione's eye. She dragged him to it, and they picked their way to the top of an old wardrobe. He plucked the crown from its high shelf, not wanting to breathe for fear of disturbing the tottering pile underneath it. "Do you think this is it?" he asked quietly.
"I don't know."
Hermione said, almost reverently. "Let me see it." He held it out to her, holding it uncertainly between his thumbs and forefingers to her. She leaned in closer to look. "Yes!" she gasped. "Yes, I think this is it. Look at the engraving under the stone. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. It's the diadem." She took the crown gently in her hands and held it carefully, almost lovingly, against her. "I want to smash it," Draco said, jaw clenched, clearly on edge, looking at the thing. "It won't do any good. It can't be destroyed by normal means. We've got to get out of here and see if Ron and the others are back with the things," Hermione said reasonably. They walked out of the room, but found themselves alone in the corridor. "I suppose we should wait. They know where to find us. Here, let's get behind this statue," Draco suggested. It made him nervous, being out in the open that way. "Do you think that's a good idea?" Yes, you're right," Hermione said, shaking her head a bit as though to clear it. "Are you all right?" he asked her with a bit of concern, as they repositioned behind the statue. Her expression was one of befuddlement, and it looked foreign on her face. "Yes, I'm fine. Just feeling odd, is all." Hermione looked away into the corridor, her brows knitting together in a look of confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's nothing. I just realized the Ancient Runes classroom is just down from here, you know. I miss Professor Babbling. Apparently I miss her very much. I've just realized I've forgotten nearly every rune we studied. Isn't that odd?" To Draco, it was one of the oddest things he'd ever heard. Hermione Granger forgetting a school lesson would be almost like Hermione Granger forgetting how to breathe. "Are you sure you're all right?" He tilted his head as though trying to solve a puzzle. "Yes, I think so." "Hermione, look at me," Draco said urgently. Her roving eyes focused on him, flitted away, and then focused on him again. "Name the ingredients in Polyjuice Potion." Lacewing flies, and, powdered unicorn horn, bicorn horn," he corrected. "Oh, right, silly. That was silly of me. And, flaxseed." "Fluxweed," he said, growing more concerned. "Of course, I forgot." Hermione was starting to look more and more distressed. Tears were gathering in her eyes as she stared up at him. "I'm so stupid." His eyes grew round in confusion now. "Hermione, you're the smartest person I know. What's going on?" "No, I'm not," she answered, tears falling in earnest now. "I'm a fraud, and I think I've always been one." He looked down between them to where Hermione was clutching the diadem tightly in her grip. As they had talked, she had raised it from waist level to now just under her chin. Slowly, tantalizingly, her hands were bringing it closer and closer to her head, as though intending to put it on. He slapped at it angrily. Her grip tightened slightly as she said, No, I need—" But he did not listen to what she thought she needed. He grabbed the center of the diadem and pulled hard, wrenching it from her grasp. He threw it to the ground at their feet and kicked it, so that it skittered across the stone corridor floor. Their eyes met once more, her copper ones fearful and slightly angry, his silver even more afraid and worried. Both of them breathed deeply, panting as they stared at each other in silence. "What are the ingredients in Polyjuice Potion?" he asked again, slightly out of breath. She recited perfectly from memory. Lacewing flies, stewed for 21 days, leeches, fluxweed picked at the full moon, knotgrass, powdered bicorn horn, and shredded boomslang skin, plus a bit of the person you want to turn into. She sucked in a quick breath. "Oh my God! What happened?" "That thing. I don't know. Something was wrong with you when you were holding it," Draco said, looking distrustfully across the corridor.
You suddenly didn't know things. I didn't like it."
"I didn't like it either," she said quietly. "I had all of these strange thoughts inside my head. Thoughts telling me I was stupid, ignorant, an imposter, that people actually thought I was quite unintelligent and that I should just shut up. What made it worse is that the thoughts were in my own voice, so it didn't occur to me that they weren't my own thoughts." Draco gripped her hands tightly, staring her in the eyes. "Hermione, you're one of the smartest, most wonderful people I've ever met, and will ever meet. Have no doubt about that."
"Yeah, he's right, Granger. You might be rather annoying and a bit smarmy, and sometimes you snore, but you're plenty smart," Pansy Parkinson said as she and the two Gryffindors approached quietly. Neville had taken off his Fair Isle sweater, and they had stacked several basilisk fangs inside it as a makeshift carryall. Ron looked at the diadem which glittered non-threateningly across the corridor from the statue where Hermione and Draco huddled. "What was it telling you?" he asked Hermione in a low voice. Draco went to the little crown, snatching it up roughly. Hermione did not seem to want to answer. "It told her she was stupid," the blonde wizard finally answered for her, quietly, "which is ridiculous." "Well, I guess that confirms that this is what we thought it was, then, mate," Ron said, nodding. "That locket we took off Umbridge. It put all sorts of thoughts inside my head. I was worthless, would never live up to my brothers, to Harry." Neville and Pansy exchanged wide-eyed looks at this information. What the hell kind of shit-talking jewelry had these people been handling? Hermione scoffed. "Ron, that's silly. You're a good wizard, a good man. You're level-headed, and—" Ron chuckled. "Thanks, Hermione. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but it was because of how the thing called out to me that Harry realized that I should be the one to destroy the locket. And I think it means that you need to be the one to destroy the diadem." Hermione backed a few steps away, slowly.
"No,
"Yes," Draco agreed. "Right. Weasley, what do we do? Do we need a certain spell, or does she just—" He made a stabbing motion in the air. "That's it, I think. The magic is old, dark, but crude. I'll warn you, though, Hermione," Ron said, turning to her. "It'll fight back. That voice you were hearing inside your head. It'll come back stronger before it dies."
Hermione nodded, selecting a sturdy-looking basilisk fang from the pile where Neville had dropped them. Draco placed the little crown on the nearby statue plinth and held it into place for Hermione to destroy. It was over in another minute. The guttural scream and black tarry substance that issued from the diadem as Hermione stabbed it was evidence enough of evil. Harry, Ginny, and Luna tore back around the corner just in time to see the last dregs of Voldemort's soul within the little crown die with an ethereal wail. "That's it. I'm never wearing sapphires again. Rubies and emeralds and diamonds for me from here on out," Pansy whispered to Neville, out of earshot of the rest of them. The Gryffindor nodded his agreement. "Noted, witch." He smiled down at her, pulling her into a hug. They might not understand the full implications of what they just saw, but neither of them had a doubt that it had been a success based on the quiet celebration in front of them. Harry and Ginny hugged fiercely. Draco was kissing away Hermione's mix of happy and fearful tears, and Ron had pulled Luna into an embrace that appeared to surprise both of them. "So now what?" Hermione asked, turning to the others, smiling widely. "Well, Ron destroyed the locket, and Dumbledore the ring. You did the diadem, and I did the diary," Harry summarized, ticking items off on his fingers. "And Tonks was successful," Draco confirmed, having known that she was taking a team to try and find a Horcrux. "Yes, she and your mothers broke into Gringotts and found one. She told me that they destroyed it a couple of hours ago." At the dumbstruck looks on the faces of Draco and Hermione, Ron struggled not to laugh. "I take it you didn't know they were working with Tonks?" I knew they were in contact with Tonks, but I didn't think that extended to bank robbery," Draco said in shock. Hermione gave him a wide-eyed, disbelieving look, indicating that she had known nothing about her mother's involvement. Everyone hid their smiles, knowing that this would probably be discussed between the two of them later.
"Harry! The room!" Ginny said suddenly. "Didn't you say everyone was planning to come through there? It needs to be the room for Dumbledore's army for the passage to work."
"Shit, you're right. Okay, everyone. There's only 2 left to destroy. I'm to take care of Voldemort, but that leaves the snake. Anyone who can get a clear shot at it, kill it. All right?" Everyone, even Neville and Pansy, nodded in understanding. The room was transformed, and the group from the corridor entered the room of requirement, just in time to see the passage door on the far side of the room open. The first members of the Order of the Phoenix were arriving.
Thank you for listening to The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. If you enjoyed this and would like to listen to more, please subscribe to me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts at Silver and Copper, or search Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.